Go. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Jane. I am Pam Myers with Pam Myers Social Media, and our show is Conversations with Jane C. Phillips. And Jane is a medical intuitive, a paranormal investigator, and a psychic medium. And this week, we are continuing our conversation that we've had on dowsing and the tools and techniques that Jane uses. So, good morning, Jane. Great to see you.
Well, good morning, and welcome everybody who's listening in. These conversations are meant to be just some training and maybe get a little bit more, you'll learn a little bit more about how I work. So if maybe down the road you want to learn some things from me or get some assistance, but this is educational. So Pam and I, a couple weeks ago, it's been several weeks, we started out with talking about dowsing as a way to gain information, to access your guidance and some of that other stuff. And we started out with working with a pendulum, and this is the one I use nowadays. It's a pretty fancy one, but a pendulum works really well for things like dowsing in a map or anything else like that you can sit at a desk and do some things and ask questions. And then after we talked about that, we went into my L rods, which are kind of hard to see on this screen, but that I use. They don't work as well seated. They're for when you're moving around in the field, whether I'm moving around in a house and trying to find energies in the house. My intention will direct the guides to help me run my rods to find the edges of things. I can find the edge of somebody's energy field or the edge of an energy field in a house or the center of things because they'll cross, which you can kind of see crossing. There we go. So today I wanted to talk about one that people are less familiar with unless you're in the field. And we mentioned it before, but this is my dowsing bobber. So it's got, as you can see it's got some coils here. It's a piece of metal. This one's just got a round end, and then it's hooked up to a dowel. So these are things you can actually make yourself. You don't have to go online. I had somebody make a bunch of them for me. So the difference between this and the other two is these are way more spatial. So think of the pendulum as something you can say, where should I go on a map, or where is something located, and you can put your pendulum over and it'll spin. And the L rods are for when you're out walking around. This is also a little bit more of a stationary tool, but it's in space. So it's hard to see in a video how to work it, but what happens is by my intention, I can ask to clear someone's energy field with it. So what happens if I ask it to clear an energy field, I'm just lightly holding the end and letting it spin. Mm-hmm. And what happens is if I run this up and down, try not to hit somebody, by the way, if you're doing this, run it down somebody's energy field up and down and around and back and all of that, you will actually can clear their energy field. And the first time somebody handed me their bobber, they told me that this particular instrument was really great, but it didn't work for them. It wouldn't move at all for them. And so because I'd been doing a lot of dowsing, I said, well, let me try. And I picked it up and it was instantaneously moving all over the place. But I didn't know what to do with it. And this friend of mine said, well, apparently you can clear people's energy field and just run it over let it do its thing around their energy field. So I said, okay. And so I said, well, let me try with you because it was working for me. And it was going back and forth and up and down and in circles. I did all the way around her. And I said, well, that was really cool. And I said, here. And I handed it back to her. Mm-hmm. And it worked for her now. She could use this. It was responsive to her where it wasn't before.
Well, why do you think that happened that way?
I don't know for sure, but each of us around think we have doubts, right?
Right.
Whether it's about a job or it's around learning dowsing. I talked earlier that the first time I had my pendulum up, if it moved, it was a yes, and if it didn't move, it was a no. And now it moves all over the place and gives me information. So I think we can block it, just like we can block success or block other things. I think an unknown block was in her energy field that was preventing, because this isn't coming, when this moves, it's not coming from me, it's coming, energies that I'm working with are running energy through me. Sort of like from God, it's coming from up above and through me. And she had some block, and whatever I did, unblocked it. So, but what I discovered later, besides just clearing energy fields, I can use it like a pendulum to remove dark energy. And when I do that, it'll spin counterclockwise, just like this. It looks clockwise to you, but it's counterclockwise. And put energy in by clockwise. And if I'm working with a group of people, I can do that same kind of thing with my pendulum, but this is more visible. So when I'm training, when I'm putting energy into a room or removing energy from a space, I can do it standing up in front of a bunch of people. And it's more visible, and it also seems like it's doing more, even though it probably isn't. So there's that piece of it. So I use this, I have in the past when I'm at somebody's house, to clear energy from a room, because it's so sweeping. In some ways it might be faster. But one of the cool things I discovered by accident is most of us have heard about sacred geometry, and people have heard about something called the flower of life, which is a really sacred geometry piece, and it shows up in all sorts of different ways. But what I found was, I don't remember why, but I was watching Raymond Grace video. He's a dowser I follow, and Raymond is Raymon without a D, grace.com. And he was using this bobber, they're called bobbers, and you can get little ones, but I like my big cheap one. And you can use it to clear, and he was putting flower of life energy into a space. And I noticed the bobber was moving differently. So I tried it, and sure enough, instead of just going in a circle or up and down, it was moving back and forth and in a circle and all over the place. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So something popped into my head, and I said, I wonder what peace looks like. What if I wanted to put peace energy into a room? And so when I put peace in, it actually, I do it right, it goes clockwise in small little circles and just keeps doing that.
Oh, wow.
Put silence in, I get a slightly different version of that. So if I put abundance in, I get another version. So if you wanted to play around with the bobber, and you can get them online or make your own, you just need something to wrap, a pipe to wrap your metal and a way to get it stuck in here. You can start putting sacred geometry and positive energy into your space.
Oh, interesting.
And it's pretty fun. So you just have to make sure you don't hit the walls or hit somebody when you're working on them. But I wanted you to be aware of these tools. You don't have to be a professional dowser. You don't have to be, because they make all sorts of versions of the things I showed you, the L rods and the bobbers and the pendulums. There are all sorts of different versions, but the basic stuff is fun to experiment with, and you can do some really positive things for yourself and your environment with the bobber.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
Is there something like some situation that stands out to you that you could use as an example to kind of, one time when you've used where you talked about finding the center of the energy with your rods? Was there Is there an experience that you can talk about?
That's a good
I
question.
put you on the spot with that one.
I think what happened is I had a business partner. Tom and I were partners, not for the paid part of my business, but for doing energy work around the area that I live in Santa Fe. And he didn't use the L rods that I had. He just would bend a coat hanger, or actually we had a lot of those electrical flags. It's just a piece of wire with a flag, red flag,
Right.
because we would mark places we were working on, and I'd have a magic marker and I'd write down the flag. But for it, rather than having a professional L rod, he just bent one of those flags and then held it lightly so it would move in his hand and use that. But he taught me to find centers of things, I believe, when we were out. If we were trying to find like an energy center called a portal out in the wilderness, both of us had the ability to look and pretty much point our noses in the same direction. And then he would use his rod. He just did one, but if he had two, they would cross. And mine, I would do two, and they would cross when we hit the center of something. And so that's probably my first experience with it. And what it does is it's a helpful tool. You could probably use it. People are using it for well dowsing, right? Where's the best place to drill? And your rods are pointing you. They point, right? And you head that way, and all of a sudden they go bam, and you go, that's a center.
Okay.
So I think it's not one thing. It was over time with the X marks the spot thing.
Right. Yeah. But haven't they used like dowsing rods to find well water? Has been used for, gosh, a long time, hasn't it? I mean,
right. And so I think I talked a little bit in another session. People who are professional well dowsers have learned some protocols, have set up some procedures that the energies that work with them are following. So they, first of all, L rods can point, right? So which direction in this 5 acres do I start walking to find a drilling place? So it'll point, but then the other piece is you program so that when you say, I want to find water, as I said in an earlier session, you have an agreement with the energies that are working with you that the water you're finding is potable, drinkable,
yes,
drillable. You can get to it within X number of feet from the surface, right? So you don't want to be on the edge of a cliff and have to go all the way to the bottom, which means you can't get a tractor in there. And the other piece is the water going to be consistent, right? And how many gallons per minute? So when you set that up as a protocol, that's a known protocol, so that when you say, find me water, all of those things are in the protocol. So you don't have to say it every time that it's potable, drillable, within 200 feet, X gallons per minute, and won't dry up. So it's all of that. People have wells around here in the Santa Fe area where I live. I have a friend of mine who has a beautiful property, but her well dried up.
Right.
You don't want to spend all this money. Drilling a well is expensive. You don't want to spend the money to get the water and then suck it out within the first year. And there you are, needing to drill again. So, and you can use all of these, like this tool, you could use it by intention, say, okay, am I starting to walk? So my no looks like this, and my yes can look like this. Actually, for some people, it's the other way. This is no, back and forth, and yes, nodding and shaking your head. So you can use your body and in these other tools, the L rods just work a little bit better. You can say, should I go in this direction, and then you finally get a yes. And then you can ask a tool like this to help you in a similar way, but it's just less efficient.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for that this morning. That's great.
So this is our last in the series. If you want to know more, I've from other people, I don't keep this on my website, but there's a fellow named Walt Wood, Woods, and he's passed on now, but Raymond Grace has an interview with him that you might want to see. Walt has a book called Letter to Robin, and he's got 2 of them that are free that you can download and get some ideas about dowsing. And then there's the American Dowsing Society that you could become a member of. You don't have to know anything to become a member. I think it's $75 a year, but you get access to their 2 international conferences that they hold every year in the United States. And so you can have some fun and with it. And if you need some services from me, I use the dowsing in my medical intuitive practice to double check information I'm getting from people, or if somebody has some sort of an issue in their body, I'll use my anatomy chart to say, oh, it's this muscle. We got to work on this muscle, and then I have some protocols. Or if I'm on site doing energy work to clear a property of some maybe negative energies, I'll use my L rods a lot more than my pendulum. So I have a lot of tools that I use to help you, and I want you to have some tools on your own so that you can do some things yourself. But I'm here to help. My website, janecphillips.com, will give you the access to both websites and my blogs, and so that you can get a little more information about me. But I'd love to help. And thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. We do this every Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time. So that's 9 Pacific and noon Eastern and 11 Central. So look forward to having you listen in again.
All right. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you.